Hey everybody. Those of you who follow the whole debate over police brutality in American society have probably already heard of the so-called Ferguson effect. Ever since the controversy over the shooting of Michael Brown by Officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri, a lot of more pro-police participants in the debate, generally political conservatives for the most part, have been warning darkly of rising rates of violent crime in America's cities and chalking it up to the idea that protests against the police have had a sort of chilling effect on law enforcement across the country, and therefore those protesters, particularly members of the Black Lives Matter movement, are more or less to blame for these rising rates of violent crime. At first, most scholars, criminologists, and so on were skeptical that it was even happening at all. But now that we've had a couple of years worth of data and observation and study, it seems some scholars are actually concluding that violent crime rates are at least somewhat on the rise in a number of American cities. It's not clear exactly what is contributing to those increases in crime in all of these cities. It's not clear that there is any one cause, nor is it clear that even if there is only one cause, this so-called Ferguson effect is it. However, it does appear that in at least some of these cities, less proactive techniques being carried out by law enforcement have at least contributed to the problem. Should we conclude that the police lobby and their supporters are correct? The rest of us just need to shut up and follow orders? Fall into line, support police officers, support law enforcement unquestioningly or uncritically, lest we face rising levels of violent crime in our cities, lest the country revert to the much higher crime rates that it saw in the late 20th century, lest we give up on all the gains in crime reduction that have been achieved in the past generation alone, the past 20 to 25 years? My answer to that question is no. Even if some police, in at least some parts of the country, some cities, are policing or doing their jobs less proactively as a result of the controversy over police brutality in the country, I don't think that's any good reason for the protests against police brutality to stop. At the end of the day, police brutality is a grave and grotesque injustice in principle. As a matter of moral principle, police officers who abuse their authority and abuse the very people whom they're supposed to be protecting have to be held accountable. It's the right thing to do. And this blue wall of silence phenomenon, whereby even the majority of police officers who are honest and honorable and do their jobs properly, the good apples in the barrel, nonetheless close ranks around the bad apples and protect them in all but the most egregious cases, that needs to stop as well. Now, if some police really are policing less proactively in response to these anti-police brutality protests, then I think that just means that they are essentially trying to hold society hostage, saying, back up off our cases and let us do our jobs any old way we want, otherwise we are going to penalize the society at large by leaving you at the mercy of the criminal element out there. That's not a very honorable way for peace officers to approach their jobs. Nor is that likely to improve police-community relations, which are necessary not only to keep the community safe, but to enable police to do their jobs just for their own satisfaction, just for the satisfaction that they derive from putting real bad guys behind bars. What's needed is not to scapegoat all police officers, nor should we react in a knee-jerk fashion to every case of alleged police brutality by immediately jumping to the conclusion that brutality and racism are in fact to blame. We need to reserve judgment in each particular case and wait until the evidence and the facts are in and base our conclusions on those facts, on that evidence, and on the logic that applies to each situation. But in cases where the evidence shows that police brutality, rank naked police brutality, really was an issue, I don't see any reason not to protest against the police. I don't see any reason not to hold law enforcement's feet to the fire, especially in cases where the courts, prosecutors, and other members of the justice system seem to be determined to close ranks around the police officers who are under suspicion in a reflexive manner, in a knee-jerk manner, and protect them no matter what they've pulled. The thing to remember, ladies and gentlemen, is that those of us who protest against police brutality are not protesting against all police officers, nor even most of them. Our goal is not to punish police officers who do their jobs properly. Our goal is to hold those who abuse their authority accountable. There's no reason why police officers who do their jobs appropriately and respect the safety and the constitutional rights of the people whom they're supposed to be protecting, whom they are sworn to protect, should have anything to fear from movements such as Black Lives Matter, movements of people who want to hold law enforcement accountable. And you shouldn't have to be a political libertarian like myself in order to see that. I will say this though, as a libertarian, I do believe that government power over the citizenry should be limited. And I also recognize that if those limits on government power are to be truly meaningful and effective, then they have to include limits on police power. At the end of the day, where does the government get the power that it has over the citizens in the first place? Why do we citizens do what the government tells us to do, at least most of the time? One of the main reasons, if not the main reason, and in some cases the only reason, is that the government has the power to send armed agents after us, to use physical force against us, to punish us if we don't do the government's bidding. So if that government's power over us is going to be limited, you best believe we need to limit the power of the armed agents on whom the government relies to enforce its dictates. Now, this message that I'm sending is aimed particularly at a conservative audience. I'm tired of hearing people who claim to believe in liberty and limited government, nonetheless reflexively close ranks behind law enforcement no matter what's going on, in almost all cases. I'm tired of hearing people who claim to believe that the government should not be abusing its power over the citizens, reflexively defend the very people from whom that government power over the populace is derived at the end of the day. It's time for this conservative love affair with law enforcement either to end or at least to be ratcheted back substantially. It's time to hold police officers accountable, and not even just the ones who commit acts of brutality and abuse and other forms of misconduct, but also the good apples in the barrel who nonetheless inexplicably seem determined to defend the bad apples. It's time for the whole barrel to be held accountable. And that is the case whether there is a Ferguson effect or not.